Callouts are communication that you have with your teammates in the middle of a competitive game over a voice call. Typically, they're not going to broadcast callouts over a tournament stream because then someone could, in theory, feed one team information from the other team's callouts and see what they're planning. But if you were to watch a first-person perspective of a team esport, your enjoyment of the game's soundtrack might be interrupted a little bit.
He did not cross yet.
Exec, long.
I'm on. He's coming. He's last step. On E default.
Two more short. One HP short. Too short. Sky 1 HP. Killjoy Sky. Sky 1 HP.
I have it. They're not up.
Long text.
Long,
No,
last
two,
one.
Blind.
I can fly. I can smoke in a second.
Up.
1 HP.
Dead.
Learning callouts is a barrier that stops a lot of people from getting into competitive play, because only the most hardcore players care enough about the game to be willing to learn how to socialize with other people just so they can gain a competitive advantage. Fortunately for you, I, as an elite level competitive Splatoon player, am here to offer my expertise. So just sit back, take some notes, and maybe fan me with some palm fronds or hand feed me some grapes while you're at it. Splatoon is a competitive game, so teams form and coordinate using voice calls to share information and communicate their plans during the game. This changes the game drastically. Flanks that might work in solo queue don't work as often because now the player you're flanking doesn't need to be the one that sees you to stop you. Any player on their team that sees you is going to warn everyone and make the flank less likely to work. Specials are more impactful because a player can call when they're going to use them, and their teammates can start pushing up so they're ready to fight as the missiles are falling, or the armor goes out, or the splashdown gets cancelled. Okay, callouts can't save everything. When people ask if you know callouts, they're usually asking if you know the weapon names and have the different locations on the map memorized. See, it's not very useful to be like, there's a Kenta 52 gal on the ledge, if your teammate's gonna be like,
wait, which ledge? The one by me?
No, the one by
I got splatted.
Yeah, the one by him. Years ago, when the game had just come out, a bunch of top-level players who were veterans of Splatoon 1 came up with a list of callouts to name all the different locations on the map, so that even if you've never played with someone before, if you know the callouts list, you can usefully refer to where someone is on the map wherever they go. Now that player can say, "They're perch, K-gal," and everyone on your team knows there is a K-52 on this exact ledge. The link in the description goes to a Google Drive with these community-decided map location callouts if you need them as a reference for getting into competitive Splatoon 2. As you can see, only half the map is labeled. Since the maps are all symmetrical, each callout will do double duty for your side of the map and the other side of the map. To clarify which side you mean, you may sometimes need to say our tree versus their tree, or right hill versus left hill. Both sets of adjectives have their advantages. Ours versus theirs doesn't help as much when it's not intuitively clear which area belongs to which team, but right versus left can get confusing if you're facing backwards and have to account for that when you figure out which direction to call. The callouts will definitely carry over into Splatoon 3 for any maps that return in that game, unless the level geometry of them changes. But with the new game coming out, I don't expect that many people who don't already know them will be getting into them right at this moment. Why make this video then? Because while memorizing those locations is important, it isn't the only point of callouts to locate your enemies. And a lot of what we're going to learn here will carry over not only into Splatoon 3, but really into any other competitive game that we're going to use callouts in. In fact, one of the most common problems that you see with the callouts of Splatoon 2 teams is that they try to spend too long locating their opponents and not enough time talking about what they're supposed to do about them. The major limitation to callouts is that talking is kind of slow. Splatoon is a very fast game, and the time it takes for you to observe something in-game, for that observation to trigger a thought in your head, for you to decide that that thought is worth communicating to your teammate, for you to put words to that communication, and for you to get the words out of your mouth comprehensibly, a significant amount of time in-game has passed. Your teammates then need to hear that call out, process it mentally, and only then, after all of those steps, can they start acting on it. This means that callouts cannot replace regular practice with your teammates. Sitting down and drawing out plans on a map together might well give you pretty close to the same level of advantage as being able to make callouts in-game, because you already know the plan and what people want to happen, so there aren't that many scenarios where you'll need more information. To be clear, I'm not saying it's at all a good idea to just play silently. Combining pre-planning with callouts is always the best option. There are very, very few top players who don't use callouts. Most won't even agree to team with someone if they don't use callouts, but they do speak more efficiently on the comms because they already know their job and don't need to say as much about it to get everyone on the same page. Let's get back to the callouts themselves though. It'll usually take 2 or 3 seconds before your teammate can meaningfully act on a call. And in that time, players can move pretty far. If you heard a teammate call that a player was on elbow and you're on hill, don't just decide, oh, well, they're not on me yet, I don't have to worry. They may well have made it all the way to you since the call was made. It can be tempting to decide to just keep updating everyone on that player's location. One they're attic, one they're attic. They're dropping sponge. They've got special. They're painting through street. They're going to right street. They're going up right wing. Watch right wing. They're splatting me. They're splatting me. They're squid bagging. They're squid bagging. But think about how long I've spent tracking that one player. There are 3 other opposing players in the game. I also haven't said anything about what to do about this player. If I call this player's location, one of my teammates might decide to push the player, while another one might decide to retreat from them or push someplace else where they assume the other team is weaker. You just aren't able to use callouts to be a GPS system tracking 4 players at once. Even if you could really work at it and get pretty close to that capability, it's often more effective to say something other than a player location. For example, if my teammates are in a 2v4 situation, I'm not telling them where opponents are located. That might make it sound like I want them to push in, and I really don't. What I want them to do is retreat. Ideally, I'd want them to get someplace where they can give super jumps to the rest of the team. But if they're being pushed, I just want them to jump out right away. My call here wouldn't be about where the opponents are, but instead something like 2v4, back up, or we're 2 down, back up. If I think they probably have a safe spot to hide, I'll add give jumps. If I know they need to jump out instead of back up, I'll say jump out if you can. Another powerful use for callouts is preventing the feed stagger loop. Even with teams I've played with that are well practiced, I still try to make callouts like we're 2 down, play safe, paint for special, don't stagger, when the team is outnumbered, to prevent the players that are still up from taking engagements and keeping the vicious cycle going. It's easiest to panic and go in when things are going badly, and I know that I've been stopped from making over-aggressive plays when my teammates have made calls like this. Sometimes just the act of saying it helps me remember that I need to play safely until I have support from the team, and I find myself saying it during solo queue even when no one else is listening to keep myself disciplined. On offense too, there are a lot of other callouts you can make that are more useful than enemy locations. Remember, in neutral, your #1 goal is to keep from being splatted. Your secondary goal is to apply pressure if possible, and it should only be once you have an advantage that you should start an offensive push. Advantages vary though, and your teammates may not be in a position to see an advantage as quickly as you do. As soon as you get a pick in the neutral game, calling out that you got one lets your armor support know that now would be the perfect time to pop armor and call for a push. If you're flanking and your opponents haven't seen, you have a much higher likelihood of success if you call for your teammates to engage the opponents from a different angle to keep their attention away from you. Calling, I'm flanking, pressure mid and left, gives your play a higher likelihood to succeed. One really important advantage state to communicate is special advantage. Coordinating your specials effectively will make or break your pushes. If you go in before your teammate uses the armor they have, you're both less likely to succeed because you don't have armor, and they're less likely to get value out of their armor. While they previously could have used the armor to win neutral and start an offensive push, now they probably need to save it for when you respawn. By the same token, if you use your special before your teammates are ready to go in, the special will probably accomplish nothing, and you'll severely cut your pushing power because you won't have special charge when you actually need it. At high level, you'll always hear an armor support calling not just when they have armor, but when they're close to armor. They want you to position preemptively, so that you don't go down before armor is available, but also so that in the few seconds when the armor goes off, you're close enough to the enemy team to engage, and they won't have time to kite you back and stall the armor out. A coordinated team should also talk about their plans to combine and layer specials with each other. Part of this is just making sure the specials have an impact. Using 2 armors at the same time gives you the value of 1 special for the cost of 2. It's a huge error. But you can also go further than just avoiding errors like that and actually create synergy between specials. A classic example of this is combining armor with Inkjet. Inkjet is a high variance special. It's capable of getting a quad on the enemy team, but it's also capable of getting sniped before it fires a shot. Giving the Inkjet player armor before they lift off gives them a guaranteed shot or 2. Since a good Inkjet player should always be trying to get a splat in the first 2 shots they fire, the armor significantly decreases the Inkjet's variance and makes it more reliable in situations where your team needs to clutch up to make a push happen. To do this though, both the armor user and Inkjet user need to be communicating their intentions as the push comes together. Like we've said in previous videos, it's usually a bad idea to pop every special at once. If your team waits until all 4 members have specials and then use them all at the same time to get objective control, you're spending longer than you need waiting to start a push. And then once you get map control, you don't have any more specials to maintain it. If even 1 opposing player survives this push and retreats, the enemy team will have special advantage as soon as they respawn, and that player's special can give them a way back to break your scoring run. What's even worse is if the whole enemy team just backs up and gives you the objective while they wait for your specials to be over. Using all the specials at once only gives you map control for the duration of those specials, maybe like 8 seconds. If you use all those resources and now you're still in a 4v4, you probably just lost a fight. With this in mind, the challenge becomes figuring out which specials you want to use now and which ones you want to save or expect to be charged later. This is a challenge you can discuss on comms with your teammates in the moments leading up to a push. As a rule of thumb, most teams try to start pushes as soon as they have 2 specials ready to push with, and the other team doesn't have an advantage like numbers advantage or having more specials ready to go to counter push. Remember, callouts are limited by how long they take, so it's important to make them as quick and efficient as you can get them. There's one player, I think it's the K-Pro, who's probably going to be flanking right. It's taking this long before your teammates knew what direction they should start looking. If they need to look at it right now, you need to be yelling, right flank, K-Pro. Or behind us, K-Pro. Cut the unnecessary syllables. This is not the time to be a good English student and use complete sentences. For the same reason, keep the comms focused on the game. Joking around and keeping it light is a good idea while you're waiting around for the game to start, but once you're in weapon select, talk comps, talk map mode, talk game plan. Don't distract your teammates from in-game decisions they need to make by talking about what you had for lunch on Thursday or what dress you're wearing to prom. A less obvious way you can take up unneeded space on comms is by complaining. If you're talking about the game but it doesn't help your teammates make decisions, you might as well be talking about a prom dress or a blue cheeseburger. I hear a lot of variations of, oh, they're so weak, they were one shot, when players lose fights. Maybe a quick, they're weak, might encourage your teammate to go back in and trade for you, but be very careful that you don't use that call out to complain. Oh, they're so weak, literally one shot is way longer and more emotionally charged than it needs to be. And it also doesn't help at all if you can't realistically expect your teammates to be there to trade them back. In fact, sometimes this can bait your teammates into fighting someone that they think is weak, when by the time they get there, that isn't the case anymore. Players don't stay one-shot in Splatoon for very long, especially if they're playing smart and sitting in their ink to heal. It's pretty common for a teammate to charge recklessly in when they hear a call like that, because they think they only need to hit a single shot, so they aren't as worried about positioning. This is an easy way to turn a 1-down situation into a 2-down situation, tilting your teammate who thought they should have been able to win the engagement. Don't defend your decision to take a fight to your team. Don't complain about how a weapon is broken or a player is laggy. Let your teammates know you're down, and keep your focus on the game, not on your ego. As we get further into my system of callouts, I want to make it clear that other teams and other players will do this differently. Vocabulary and conventions and syntax may differ from one player to another, and that's okay. In fact, there are a lot of callouts that I make that are different from the accepted community list. There are a couple of locations on certain maps, for example, that are called suicide, and I don't like that. Number one, for mental health reasons, but number two, because it's 3 syllables, like that's longer than it has to be. So this location on Blackbelly, I just called T. And this location on Walleye, well, if you're playing Walleye, I don't know what the tournament organizer is doing, so that shouldn't matter anyway. I digress. The point here is that everyone does callouts a little bit differently, and what you should take from this is not the way I do it is the end-all be-all. What you should actually be taking from this is the thought, all right, these are the problems that Gem's system solves. Does my system solve those problems? And if not, then maybe you can pick up a few of the habits from my callouts to use in your own. If I see an enemy player, what I say on the comms depends on what I want my teammates to do about them. If they have to retreat, I'm just going to say back up or jump out or something like that. They don't need to know about the range of the weapon that's pushing them. They don't need to consider how they're going to take a fight. They just need to not be where they currently are. Otherwise, a callout is generally going to have 3 pieces of information. It's going to have where that player is, what weapon that player is using, and what I want my teammate to do about them. Usually, I will say one of 3 things to do about them, which is either to watch them, ignore them, or push them. We'll start with the ignore callout, probably the least common of the 3. The ignore callout is for when someone is so far out of position that if we just attack the other players on the team, we've basically got a numbers advantage, because that player way on the other end of the map isn't affecting the objective push that we're trying to put together here. So we should take advantage of them being out of position and go and do something else. Now, it's important to remember that callouts are temporary. Yes, right now that player is probably out of position, but remember that they're there when you see them, and 5 seconds from now, that ignore callout might need to change to a watch callout or a push callout, because even the silliest of flanks will eventually end up at your back. Watch means that the player is in a position we need to keep an eye on. So for example, watch snipe K-Pro indicates that there's an enemy Kensa Splattershot Pro player on the location marked snipe. We might not need them out of the way immediately, but they could make an aggressive play from there, and we can't just wander blindly into their zone of control and expect to be successful. Push means that I'm targeting that opponent and want my teammates to start putting pressure on them or commit to a fight with them. For example, push street or push junior street means that I want my teammate to engage against the enemy, in this case Splattershot Junior player, that's in the location called street. This is an important call out for frontliners who are routinely trying to set up advantageous fights and need to know where they're needed quickly. As a general rule, follow your teammates' instructions right away. It's easier to win if you execute the wrong call quickly than if you spend time arguing before making the right call. Now, sometimes you can see right away that pushing the way your teammate wants you to will just lead to you getting immediately splatted. In those cases, I can't, or just can't, is a great call out, letting your teammate know that you can't support them in the way that they want. Even then though, just getting an opponent to shoot at you while dancing around and staying alive can be enough to give your teammate the opportunity they need to commit to the fight and take them out. Just because you can't hold forward and press ZR doesn't mean you can't engage the opponent and get a win out of it. If a call out requires immediate action, it's a very good idea to repeat that call out.
Was that right?
For one thing, sometimes it's hard to catch what someone said when you were focusing on something else and didn't start paying attention in time to catch the beginning of the call out. For another, repetition makes your call more of a priority because it overrides what anyone else could say or pay attention to at that moment. If you call "won their snipe" calmly and only say it once, that says more of a watch to me. We're just being made aware that there is someone on their snipe. Obviously, your teammates should be careful, but there doesn't seem to be an immediate threat that anyone needs to deal with from there. But if you're riding the tower during overtime and there's someone on snipe, this is going to be more of a one snipe, one snipe, one snipe. And that's a push call out that's going to get you immediate attention from your teammates. While repetition does have utility, it needs to be used sparingly. You can't just repeat every single callout you make, because then nothing that you repeat is going to stand out as particularly important. Also, the more you repeat something, the less your teammates are going to be able to say, and the more likely it is that you're talking over something else that's more important than what you have to say. Generally, it's pretty unnecessary to repeat anything more than 3 times. At that point, your teammates have heard you, they get it. Yelling at them more isn't going to add anything useful, and it may actually hurt the team more than it helps. While we've been talking about the way the game is played so far, it's important to remember that a team game is also a social environment. You're not just yelling at a video game, you're yelling at human beings with feelings. If you keep repeating something you want your teammates to do, and it isn't getting done, you're getting past the point where the problem is that they haven't heard or that they aren't paying attention. They're probably now trying to do something about it, but being stopped. If you keep demanding it, it could get frustrating to them, because the expectations that you have don't match with what they're able to do in that moment. This hurts your team's morale. Even if what they're failing to do is something you expect them to be able to do, getting upset is only making them less likely to clutch up and actually pull it off. Never activate your teammates' emotions in a way that distracts them from in-game decisions that they need to be making. There are a number of ways that people often activate negative emotions by mistake, and I'd encourage you to do some humble, honest self-reflection to figure out if you might be doing any of these things yourself. The most obvious way to tilt a teammate is by saying something negative to them. It could be something aimed at that teammate. Come on, you gotta hit those shots. But it could also be something that encourages them to give up. I can't do anything. Or, these guys are so sweaty, oh my god. It could be a complaint about something that, if you really break it down, isn't the main reason you're losing. This tri-slosher is so laggy, dude. Plug your router back in. If a player is lagging, clip it, show it to a tournament organizer, and otherwise keep playing the set. Maybe it might help you warn your teammates, like lead your shots a little bit more against the tri-slosher, they're teleporting a bit. But even that might give them a reason to feel like it doesn't matter if they lose a fight to the tri-slosher. It gives them an excuse. Yeah, we lost, but that tri-slosher was lagging. What were you supposed to do about it? Laggy players are beatable most of the time. Yeah, it might impact a 1v1 that you have with them to the point where you lose what you might have otherwise won. And that sucks. But one 1v1 that you lose is probably not the reason that your team is going to lose an entire game of Splatoon. There are other factors involved that you can control, and you should focus on controlling. It's only the most severe cases that even really change that much. Focus on winning now. Deal with that issue when the game is over. That's also my philosophy for dealing with criticisms you have of your teammates. If you've been playing the game for 3,000 hours, and in the 3,001st hour, your teammate tells you, in front of the rest of the team, to take smarter fights, without any further elaboration, that's probably not going to change by the 3,002nd hour. What might happen, though, is that you tilt because someone was upset with you in the middle of the game. If someone's feeding and staggering the team, telling them stop feeding right after they die might be the worst thing you can do. Instead, wait for them to respawn, and before they drop into a fight, call, "Don't drop, stay patient, paint for specials." Now there is an actionable thing they can do, an instruction they can follow, other than be less bad at the game. And it tends to be interpreted a lot more positively. It's also very important to be careful about your tone and inflection. The way a person says something can make a huge difference in how it's interpreted. "Don't drop, stay patient, paint for specials" can come across as negative if you say, "Don't drop, stay patient, paint for specials." It can be hard to prevent frustration from creeping into your voice if things haven't been going well and you have a lot of overwhelming things to pay attention to on screen. To counter this, I habitually use the same tone and rising inflection on my callouts. This prevents them from coming off like accusations. It sounds really silly to say something mean in this voice. "You're throwing? You're off the team? I hate you? Your sister is ugly? Go jump in a lake? I hope you step on a Lego?" The whole point of talking like this is just so that it's always clear that my intention with what I'm saying is to cooperate and share information, not to accuse, not to bring other people down for my ego's sake. It keeps my emotions out of it and shows that it's not personal. Something that's also important to remember as both a coach and a teammate is that the optimal ratio of praise to corrections is 5 to 1. Ideally, during VOD reviews and coaching sessions, you want to be giving 5 compliments for every criticism. That's really, really hard to do and sound genuine. I'll admit, I don't think I'm that good at it myself. But whenever I notice my teammate met expectations, did what they needed to do, had a significant impact, I always try to remember to tell them good job when there's a chance. Obviously, you can't spend too long on that, especially if the fight isn't over yet, but it can go a long way toward keeping morale up and preventing people from getting insecure, getting nervous, getting in their own heads, and playing worse. It also helps players latch onto something specific that they did right and remember to do that thing again. Positive reinforcement is a powerful teaching tool. If you're trying to get some practice on these new callout skills and you don't know where to start, here are a couple of ideas. Number 1, there are a whole bunch of servers on Discord where they hold pickup scrims. A pickup scrim is where you post that you're looking for more players to play with, you group up into a Discord DM, and then the 4 of you post looking for a scrim, where a full pre-made team of 4 that formed elsewhere can find you so that you two can both play against each other. That's a great way to meet more people who are playing the game competitively, to learn a lot more because those players will probably have a lot that they can teach you, and to get some practice, even in social situations that you might not be the most comfortable in. Another great way to learn is to find a team. I have a video on finding a team that I will link in the description below. I think finding a team is one of the most valuable and enriching experiences that you can have in Splatoon 2, but it's also pretty difficult to find the right group of teammates, and so, like I said, I have a whole video out on how to do that. You can check that out in the description below. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer in my Discord called Squid School, and post in the comments if you have anything else that you'd like to share, anything you'd like to add, anything that you have as a piece of advice, or anything you think I got wrong, and maybe I'll even read it. We'll see you next time.